Hi everyone, hope that you all are doing well. So previously on my channel I have covered JWT authorization. Now we are updating the JWT authorization with Spring Security 6 and along with that some important improvements in the. But before we jump into the video's context, I would like to request you all to like, share and comment on the video, and if new to the channel please subscribe and press the bell. So JWT JSON Web Token provides a layer of enhanced security over the basic security provided by Spring. So let's implement a REST application where we will be registering a user through our REST API, and when we try to log in through that user's credential, a JWT token is being generated and returned to, and using that JWT token as a barrier token, we can access the protected URL. There would be a protected URL that can be accessed only when the JWT token is being added as a barrier token. So there would be a mechanism where we'll be checking the JWT token value and fetching the user on that basis, and if that our mechanism authorize that request, then only the access. So let's go to the IDE and let's start building the project. So I'm on my IDE. Let's go and let's build a new project. So let me say new, let me say project Spring Starter project. So my project name is JWT Spring Security 6. I'm keeping Java version as 21 and my packages name are com.code with raman.implementation. Let's go next. And here we need the Spring version as 3.3.4 and we need the Spring security dependency, right? We need Spring web dependency and we need Spring data JPA dependency and MySQL dependency, right? So all these dependencies are required to create the REST APIs, right? And then we will be, when the project builds, we need to add some JWT dependency that I'll discuss when the project is imported and ready. So let me import the project. So my project is ready and imported. So let's go to pom.xml. Let me open the pom.xml. Let me add the JWT dependencies that I was asking when we were creating the project. So let me add the dependencies of JWT, right? So these are my JWT dependencies. Is JWT API, JWT implementation and Jackson, right? So these are the three dependencies that you require in your project for implementing JWT in your security. So now let's go and let's start by creating the model class. So I require a model as I'll be saving the data to the database, so I need a model. So let me create a package first. Let me say dot model, and here I need to create a class of user, right? So let me create new class and let me name it as user. This is my user model, right? So I've marked this as @entity and @table, and then we have the primary key ID, right, that we have used as the generator type as a identity. Then we have username, password and role. So I am accepting username as a email ID, right? So I'll be taking a username as an email ID in my example. So as it creates a unique factor, right? So I am taking username as a email ID, and then we have the password, and then we have the role. So right now I am not dealing with role, just that I've kept the field in my user entity, right? And we'll be setting a default role while we'll be saving the data into the database. So we'll be setting a default role, but I'll not be getting the role from the user in an input, right? So this is my user model. Now let's create the repository. So let me create a new package. Let me create a new package called as repository, and let me create a new class that is user repository. So let's say user repository, right? So I have made a class, it's an interface. So I need an interface, and let me extend this with JPA repository, right? JPA repository, and here I need to enter the user object, and I need to give the type of primary key that I've made in my user entity. So that's type long, so that's long, right? So this is my repository. Now let's create services as well. So we have the repository, we have the model, we need services, right? So first let me create a service that will be like a custom service that is basically dealing with the registration process. So let me create a class called as user service, right? User service. So this is my user service, right? So we have auto-wired user repository and the password encoder, right? What we are doing here is we are getting the input from the user as username and password. So we have kept the entity structure very simple here, that the user will input only username and password. We are setting the default role, as I said. So we are setting the default role as role underscore user. We are encoding the password and we are setting the username into the username, and just we are saving using the user repository, right? So this is my registration process, right? So this method will be called when the user wants to register the user, right? So this is my registration user service. So now I need a custom user details service that basically will deal with the login process. So it will be extending the user detail service. So the capabilities of user detail services are load user by username method, right? So that is the very important method that Spring Security handles all the checking of the data, right? What the user has input, the inputs are correct or not, the email ID, password are correct or not, encoding is done properly or not. So all those things have been taken care by custom user details, right? So there is a method called as load user by username, and that will deal with everything, right? So in the service package only, I have to create custom user details. So let's go and let's create a new class, that is custom user details service. So this is my custom user detail service. So basically it implements the user detail service, right? So user detail service has a default method called as load user by username, right? So we have overridden that method. So basically this method will deal with all the authentication of the user while login, right? So basically it is first fetching the user from the database using the username and creating a user object, right? And then we are returning the user details object basis the user object, right? So here we are passing the empty list, right? Empty list of the roles, and password and the username are being fetched from this particular user from the database, right? So this particular method is inherently this particular method has been called by Spring Security by itself, right, for validating the login crawl, right? So my login process, registration process are done. Now let's come to the part of JWT, right? So we have to implement JWT in our code. So let's first create a package called as config, and let's write Spring Security config. So let me first create a package. So let me create a package of config, right? And in that config package I have to create security config class, right? So first we'll be writing the security part, and then we'll jump to JWT and JWT authentication, right? So let me say security config. So this is my security config, right? So ignore the first part. We need the JWT authentication filter. Just that this JWT authentication filter will be used to authenticate the requests that are coming with the barrier token, right? So this is the call. The filters would be used when the user has already been authorized by our calls, right? So the JWT token has already been the JWT token has already been generated, and then we are using that JWT token to access some protected URL, right? So that protected URL can get access through JWT authentication filter itself, right? The first call will be landing on the JWT filter for authenticating the request, right? So here what we have written a security filter chain method, right? So here what we are doing, we are first disabling the CSRF, and then we have used the authorization request, and we have passed some matchers like register and login are being permitted, right? So there is no authentication provided on these, right? These URLs can be directly accessed by the user. There is no authentication or authorization. Any request that comes other than this, that needs to be authenticated. We are writing that any other request that comes, so add a filter before, right? Add a filter before JWT authentication filter, and username password authentication filter is a default filter that we have passed here, right? So now let's design the JWT authentication filter, or rather let's design the JWT authentication filter, and then we'll be designing the mechanism of generating the token and verifying the token through JWT util, right? So let's create a class. So let me create a class here, right? So let me say let me ask this to create a class. So I'm saying create a class, right? We need in the config package. So now this is my JWT authentication class, right? Authentication filter that extends once per request filter. So it's like that every request this filter will be applied, right? So this filter will be applied, and there is a overridden method of do filter internal, where we are passing the servlet request and response and the filter chain, right? So here what we are doing basically, let's understand the flow of the application. Let's suppose that the person has tried to log in, right, and he and she was successfully logged in, and a JWT token has been generated. That JWT token basically consists of like a secret, a username, password encrypted, and some expiry time, right? And the need, if you are trying to access the protected source after login, then there is a requirement that there should be a barrier token in your request, right? So what we do is we get the authorization header from the request, right? So we are getting the authorization header from the request, and what we are saying that from the authorization header there should be a key that will be starting from barrier with space. So there would be 7 characters that would be there, and then what we are saying that leaving those 7 characters, fetch whatever string you get. So JWT will get a string, right? So JWT will get a string leaving aside the barrier token, the key barrier, right? And that string will be passed to JWT utils to extract all the data. Like, so you need to extract the username, you need to check that the particular JWT token is valid and the expiry is not done. There is time for expiry of that token, right? So these all things you have to check, right? So that is why we are saying that first remove the barrier dot space, and then fetch all the data that you get, right? And then getting that string, you have to pass it to the JWT utils to get the username, right? Now further, we get the username, right? And we say that if the username is not null and security context dot authentication is not is equal to null, that authentication is not done, but the username that we have got from the JWT token is not null, right? So then we have made a JWT user detail cache, right? So user details cache is being maintained, right? So basically what we are saying that if you get a username, try to fetch the user details from user detail cache first, right? So that the overhead to fetch the data again from the database is reduced, right? So basically we are saying that first fetch the data from the cache. If you don't find the data from the cache, then again hit the custom user details load user by username method and load the user detail object, right? And what we are doing is when the request has come for the first time and there is no data in the user detail cache, then it will enter this if block, and in this if block we are adding the user details with the username in the user detail cache, right? So that next time that the person comes and the do filter is being requested, like let's suppose that particular application that the person is working on has 10 or 15 protected URLs, right? But that requires a login at first. So the JWT token has been generated once, but every time the person is trying to hit the protected URL, he or she has to pass the barrier token, and that barrier token will get authenticated. So whenever that authentication process starts, so do filter method is being called from Spring Security. As I said, that add filter before every request. So JWT authentication filter is being added from before every request. So this do filter is being called, and then all this process has been done, right? JWT username is fetched and all those things are done. And then what we are saying that the JWT token, we have fetched the username, we have validated that the user is correct. Now we have to validate that the particular JWT token is correct or not, right? So we have to check that the expiry is not done of the particular JWT token that is being provided by the user. The password that is present in the token is correct or not. The access is given to the user or not. So this is like a second layer of authentication before we give the access to the user to that particular protected URL, right? So this is the second layer of authentication that we are passing. We have already validated that the user is correct, right? But we are validating that the token is also correct, that the person has passed, right? So the expiry is not, the token is not expired, and all other things like the encryption and everything is being done correctly. So we are validating those things, and then we'll give the access to the protected URL, right? So this is my JWT authentication filter. So now let's design the JWT class, JWT util class, where we'll be writing the, basically we'll be writing all the mechanism of creating and generating the JWT token, right? So let me create a JWT util class. So this is my JWT util class. I have marked this as @component, right? And we are generating some key, that is a secret key, right? And we are using an algorithm that is HS256, right? So we are generating a secret key that will be appended into the token, right? So then we have a method called as generate token that is taking an input as a username, right? So if you when we'll be basically hitting the login request, at that moment generate token method would be called from that particular username, right? So the username is passed, and then we are building the JWT token by using JWTS library. We have used builder, and then we have set the subject as username. Then we have set the issue at, that is the date, and then we are setting the expiry of that token, right? So we have expired the token after 10 hours, right? So, and the sign with key is the key that we have generated above, right? HS256. And then we are doing the compact, right? We are calling the compact method. Then there is a method called as extract username. Basically it is taking the input as token and then extracting the claims, right? So claims are basically as if you go back to my previous video where we were discussing the JWT in the previous version of Java, I have told that what are the claims, what are subject, and I have also created the JWT token from JWT official website, right? So basically we are extracting the claims and the subject, right? So if you go into this method of extracting the claims, so let me go and click on this method. So basically extract claims, what it is taking a token and a claim resolver. So basically it will extract all the claims, and then claim resolver will apply the claims, right? So basically it is a complete process where basically we are saying that we'll generate the token, we'll extract all the claims, we'll check the expiry, we'll set the expiry and everything, right? Then we have the method called as extract expiration, right? So we are checking that the token is not expired. So if you see, it is calling again the extract claim, and then through the extract claim we are basically checking that the token is not expired, right? So then we have extract all claims. From the token we are extracting all the claims. So basically we are using the same key and then extracting all the claims. Then we have a method called as is token expired. So basically token is being taken as an input, and all the expiries are being fetched from this method, extract expiration. And then this extract expiration would be checked the date before, right? So the current date, the token should be the new date, that the current date, the token date should be more than this date, right? Should be beyond this date. That's why that is how it will give the is token expired as false, and we need it as a false when we are trying to hit the protected URLs. Then we have a validate token. So validate token is basically taking the token and the username as an input and validating the user, right? So this was JWT utils. I have basically very briefly I have discussed this JWT class in my previous video of JWT. Here what we are doing is we are implementing JWT with Spring Security 6. So there is an update to the Spring version and the JWT implementation way, right? So now let's now we have to hit the controller. So now let me create few controllers. So let me first create a package of controller. So let me say package and let me say controller, and let me create a controller as register controller. So first let me create a controller as register controller. So this is my register controller. I am giving the mapping as /API/auth, right, and slash register will be called. So basically we are calling the register user method from the user service, which is registering the data to the database, and we are returning that the user has been successfully registered. So now let's create a login controller. So in the login controller, we'll be basically creating a JWT token. So let me create a login controller. So let me say auth controller rather than login controller. So this is my auth controller. Basically what we are doing here is we are trying to hit the login request, and we are getting the input as username and password from the user, right? First we are authenticating using authentication manager that the username and password is correct. So basically it is indirectly it is authenticating the user, right? And then basically we are fetching the user details by loading the user from username. So here also the database authentication is being done and check that the user is present in the database or not. And then we are generating the JWT util, right? So we are using JWT util and generate token method. So basically it will take the input as username and generate the token. So I have already shown you the method of generating the token. So this is the method of generating the token. Basically we are using a algorithm HS256, and then the subject is username, and then we are setting the date and the expiry date, and this is how we are generating the JWT token. So let me get back to the auth controller. So when the person tries to log in, so after successful login, a JWT token will be generated for that user. So let me create another controller that will be very protected controller. So let me create like a class, and let's say hello controller. So this is my hello controller. This is the protected source, right? So when I'll try to hit this particular URL without even authorizing the user, it should give me 403, that is forbidden request, because my user is not authorized, right? So I'm done with the code part. Let's go to the application.properties and let's add some properties, because we need to store the data to a database. So these are my database properties. Let me create a schema with JWT DB name, right? So let me go to MySQL and let me create a schema. So let me select and let me run the request. So we have the schema JWT. So yes, we have the schema JWT DB. Let me set it as default. So let me say set it as default. So now the schema is set as default. So let me run the application and let's go to the Postman to test the application. So let me go to the main class first, and let me run the application. So let me go to the main class and let me run the application. Let me say run Spring Boot application. So my application has started, right? You can see the query of creation of the table. So let's go and check that the table is being created or not. Let me refresh it. So yes, we have the table of user. So let's go to the Postman. So this is my request, right? So this is my request of posting the user, right? So my username is raman@gmail.com and the password is 12345. So basically I'm trying to hit API auth register, and we are passing the username and the password in the URL itself, right? We are taking it as a params, right? Request params. Basically this is wrong. We need to accept the body, right? A JSON body, and we need to accept the object. But this is a small example. That's why I'm telling you that we are adding the username and password in the URL itself. Let me hit this request. So my user is registered. So let me go to the DB and let me first fetch the data and see that my user is registered or not. So you can see that there is an entry of the user. We have the password, we have the role, and we have the username, right? So now if I tried, like I haven't authorized my request, right? I haven't authorized my request for this particular application, and if I try to hit the hello controller, what will happen? So let me hit the hello controller from here. So you can see that we have the hello controller here. So this is a protected source and it has a get mapping. So let me hit this. So it says 403 forbidden because it requires a barrier token as an input in the authorization, right? So do filter will be called for this particular request and the JWT will be verified, and on that basis the access would be given to the URL. So now let's go and let's try to log in and let's get the JWT token first. So this is my request of auth login, username as raman@gmail.com and password as 12345. We are passing it in the URL itself. Let me hit this request. So yes, a JWT token is being generated. Let me copy this JWT token and now let's hit the hello request. So let me add it as a barrier token. Let me select it as barrier token in the authorization and let me put this here. and now if I try to hit this request, I'll be given access. So yes, you can see that hello JWT authenticated user, this is coming from this particular controller, right? So we have given the access to the user with that JWT token when the JWT token has been verified, right? So this was a very small example just to clarify on some doubts, and especially mentioning implementation in the implementation in the JWT authentication filter, where we are not hitting the database every time. We are storing the data into our cache, right? We are storing the data into our cache and we are fetching the data from our cache, right? So if in case you have a lot of users accessing, right? So in that way, this could be a very good approach towards the solution, right? So you won't be hitting, you won't be giving a lot of overhead to the database. You can fetch the data from the cache itself, right? So that was an improvement. So this was it from this video. This was a small example of implementing JWT authorization with Spring Security 6. So hope that you people like, share and comment on the video, and if new to the channel, please subscribe and press the bell icon. Hope to see you in the next video. Till then, happy learning.